Hey everyone, welcome back to the Japan Archives, episode 59. And it is good news coming back. I said last time we recorded I'll either have good news or bad news, Heather, about the job. And as you know, I have the good news, so I'll be starting the new job in April, so I can stop worrying about that now. So I'm excited about that, but I am sad that we didn't get this episode out last week. I know normally if we're doing a bonus episode, it's an extra to the main episode each week, but we only did the bonus last week. But I had the second interview. I'm now sorting out the visa. You also had your own things going on, but at least we got one out. That's the main thing. So here's the last one with the link to Pokemon before we get into the new topic next week. But do you remember the story, the name of the story for today? Do you remember which folktale?
Something with bamboo.
What a great name. So today we're telling the story of something with bamboo. No, we're telling the story of the bamboo cutter and his daughter. Again, this is another folktale. Like I said, we wanted to do it now because it links to the last Pokemon that we talked of Celesteela, one of those names. The one with the bamboo arms.
Oh, yeah.
So we get to read an original version, original translation. So we're going to go back to Yae Theodora Ozaki from 1908 and her translation of the story. So if you're ready, Heather.
Let's go.
So as we always start these stories, long, long ago, there lived an old bamboo woodcutter. He was very poor and sad, for no child had heaven sent to cheer his old age, and in his heart there was no hope of rest from work till he died and was laid in a quiet grave. Every morning he went forth into the woods and hills wherever the bamboo reared its lithe green plumes against the sky. When he had made his choice, he would cut down these feathers of the forest, and splitting them lengthwise or cutting them into joints, would carry the bamboo home and make into various articles for the household. And he and his old wife gained a small livelihood by selling them. One morning, as usual, he had gone out for his work, and having found a nice clump of bamboo, had set to work to cut some of them down. Suddenly the green grove of bamboo was flooded with a soft, bright light, as if the full moon had risen over the spot. Looking round in astonishment, he saw that the brilliance was streaming from one of the bamboo. The old man, full of wonder, dropped his axe and went towards the light. On nearer approach, he saw that this soft splendor came from a hollow in the green bamboo stem. And still more wonderful to behold, in the midst of the brilliance stood a tiny human being, only 3 inches in height, and exquisitely beautiful in appearance. "You must be sent to be my child, for I find you here amongst the bamboo where lies my daily work," said the old man. And taking the little creature in his hand, he took it home to his wife to bring up. The tiny girl was so exceedingly beautiful and so small that the old woman put her into a basket to safeguard her from the least possibility of being hurt in any way. The old couple were now very happy, for it had been a lifelong regret that they had had no children of their own, and with a joy they now expended all the love of their old age on the little child who had come for them in so marvellous a manner. From this time on, the old man often found gold in the notches of the bamboo when he hewed them down and cut them up. Not only gold, but precious stones also, so that by degrees he became richer. He built himself a fine house, and was no longer known as a poor bamboo woodcutter, but as a wealthy man. 3 months passed away quickly, and in that time the bamboo child had, wonderful to say, become a full-grown girl, so her foster parents did up her hair and dressed her in beautiful kimonos. She was of such wondrous beauty that they placed her behind the screens like a princess, and allowed no one to see her, waiting upon her themselves. It seemed as if she was made of light, for the house was filled with a soft shining, so that even in the dark of night it was like daytime. Her presence seemed to have a benign influence on those there. Whenever the old man felt sad, he had only to look upon his foster daughter and his sorrow vanished, and he became as happy as when he was a youth. At last the day came for the naming of their new-found child, So the old couple called in a celebrated name giver and gave her the name of Princess Moonlight, because her body gave forth such a soft, bright light that she might have been the daughter of the moon god. For 3 days the festival was kept up with song and dance and music. All the friends and relations of the old couple were present, and great was their enjoyment of the festivities held to celebrate the naming of Princess Moonlight. Everyone who saw her declared that there had never been anyone so lovely. All the beauties throughout the length and breadth of the land would grow pale beside her, so they said. The fame of the princess's loveliness spread far and wide, and many were the suitors who desired to win her hand, or even so much as to see her. Suitors from far and near posted themselves outside the house, and made little holes in the fence in the hope of catching a glimpse of the princess as she went from one room to the other along the veranda. They stayed there day and night, sacrificing even their sleep for a chance to see her, but all was in vain. Then they approached the house and tried to speak to the old man and his wife, or some of the servants, but not even this was granted to them. Still, in spite of all this disappointment, they stayed on day after day and night after night, and counted it as nothing, so great was their desire to see the princess. At last, however, most of the men, seeing how hopeless their quest was, lost heart and hope both, and returned to their homes. All except 5 knights, whose ardor and determination, instead of wandering, seemed to wax greater with obstacles. These 5 men even went without their meals, and took snatches of whatever they could get brought to them, so that they might always stand outside the dwelling. They stood there in all weathers, in sunshine and in rain. In this hopeless state the winter passed. The snow and frost and cold winds gradually gave place to the gentle warmth of spring. Then the summer came, and the sun burned white and scorching in the heavens above and on the earth below, and still these faithful knights kept watch and waited. At the end of these long months they called out to the old bamboo cutter and entreated him to have some mercy upon them and to show them the princess. But he answered only that he was not her real father, and so could not insist on her to obey him against her wishes. The 5 knights, on receiving this stern answer, returned to their homes, and pondered over the best means of touching the princess's heart, even so much as to grant them a hearing. They took their rosaries in hand, and knelt before their household shrines, and burned precious incense, praying to Buddha to give them their heart's desire. So again they set out for the bamboo cutter's house in the end. This time the old man came out to see them, and they asked him to let them know if it was the princess's resolution never to see any man whatsoever. And they implored him to speak for them, and to tell her the greatness of their love, and how long they had waited through the cold of winter, the heat of summer, through sleeplessness and rooflessness, through all types of weather, without food and without rest, in the ardent hope of winning her. And they were willing to consider this long vigil as pleasure if she would, but give them one chance of pleading their cause with her. The old man lent a willing ear to their tale of love, for in his most heart he felt sorry for these faithful suitors, and would have liked to see his lovely foster daughter married to one of them. So he went to talk to the princess, and said reverently, "Although you may have always seemed to me to be a heavenly being, yet I have had the trouble of bringing you up as my own child, and you have been glad of the protection of my roof. Will you refuse to do as I wish?" The princess replied that there was nothing she would not do for him, that she honored and loved him as her own father, and that as for herself she could not remember the time before she came to earth. The old man listened with great joy as she spoke these dutiful words. Then he told her how anxious he was to see her safely and happily married before he died. "I am an old man, over 70 years of age, and my end may come any time now. It is necessary and right that you should see these 5 suitors and choose one of them." "Oh, why," said the princess in distress, "why must I do this? I have no wish to marry now." "I found you," answered the old man, "many years ago when you were a little creature 3 inches high, in the midst of a great white light. The light streamed from the bamboo in which you were hid and led me to you, so I have always thought that you were more than mortal. While I am alive, it is right for you to remain as you are if you wish to do so. But some day I shall cease to be, and who will take care of you then? Therefore I pray you to meet these 5 brave men one at a time, and make up your mind to marry one of them. Then the princess that she felt sure that she was not as beautiful as perhaps report made her out to be, and that even if she consented to marry one of them, not really knowing her before, his heart may change afterwards. So she did not feel sure of them, even though her father told her they were worthy knights. She did not feel it wise to see them. All you say is very reasonable, the old man replied. But what kind of men will you consent to see? I do not call these 5 men who have waited on you for months light-hearted. They have stood outside this house through the winter and the summer, often denying themselves food and sleep so that they may win you. What more can you demand? Then Princess Moonlight said that she must make further trial of their love before she would grant them their request to interview her. The 5 warriors were to prove their love by each bringing her from distant countries something that she desired to possess. The same evening the suitors arrived and began to play their flutes in turn, and to sing their self-composed songs telling of their great and tireless love. The bamboo cutter went out to them, and offered them his sympathy for all they had endured and all the patience they had shown in their desire to win his foster daughter. Then he gave them her message, that she would consent to marry whosoever was successful in bringing her what she desired. This was their test. The 5 all accepted, and thought it an excellent plan, for it would prevent jealousy between them. Princess Moonlight sent word to the first knight that she requested him to bring her the stone bowl which had belonged to the Buddha in India. The second knight was asked to go to the mountain of Horai, said to be situated in the eastern sea, and to bring her a branch of a wonderful tree that grew on its summit. The roots of this tree were of silver, the trunk of gold, and the branches bore fruit like white jewels. The third knight was told to go to China and search for the fire rat and bring her its skin. The fourth was told to search for the dragon that carried on its head the stone radiating 5 colors, and to bring the stone to her. And the final knight was to find the swallow which carried a shell in its stomach, and to bring the shell to her. The old man thought these tasks very hard, and hesitated to carry the messages. But the princess would make no other conditions, so her commands were issued. At first the knights were disheartened, but when they thought of the princess, the love in their hearts revived them, and they resolved to make an attempt to get what she desired. The first knight sent word to the princess that he was starting out that very day on the quest for the Buddha's bowl, and he hoped to bring it to her soon. But he had not the courage to go all the way to India, for in those days traveling was very difficult and full of danger. So he went to one of the temples in Kyoto and took a stone bowl from the altar there, paying the priest a large sum of money for it. He then wrapped it in a cloth of gold, and waiting quietly for 3 years, returned and carried this bowl to the old man. The princess thought it odd that the knight would have returned so soon, and she took the bowl from its gold wrapping, expecting it to make the room full of light, but it did not shine at all. So she knew that it was a sham thing, and not the true bowl of the Buddha. She returned it at once and refused to see him. The knight threw the bowl away and returned to his home in despair, giving up now all hopes of winning the princess. The second knight told his parents that he needed change of air for his health, for he was ashamed to tell them that love for the princess was the real cause for him leaving them. He then left his home, at the same time sending word to the princess that he was setting out for Mount Horai in the hopes of getting her the branch of the gold and silver tree. He only allowed his servants to accompany him halfway, and then sent them back. He reached the seashore and embarked on a small ship, and after sailing away for 3 days, he landed and employed several carpenters to build him a house contrived in such a way that no one could get access to it. He then shut himself up with 6 skilled jewelers, and endeavored to make such a gold and silver branch as he thought would satisfy the princess as having come from this wonderful tree upon the mountain. Everyone whom he had asked declared that Mount Horai belonged to the land of fable, and did not actually exist. When the branch was finished, he took his journey home, and tried to make himself look as if he was wearied and worn out with travel. He put the jeweled branch into a lacquered box and carried it to the bamboo cutter, begging him to present it to the princess. The old man was quite deceived by the travel-stained appearance of the knight, and though he had only just returned from his long journey with the branch, he tried to persuade the princess to consent to see this man. But she remained silent and looked very sad. The old man began to take out the branch and praised it as a wonderful treasure to be found nowhere in the whole land. Then he spoke of the knight, how handsome and brave he was to have undertaken a journey to such a remote place as the mountain of Horai. The princess took the branch in her hand and looked at it carefully. She then told her foster parent that she knew it was impossible for a man to have obtained a branch from the gold and silver tree growing on Mount Horai so quickly and so easily, and she was sorry to say that it was artificial. The old man then went out to the expectant knight, who had now approached the house, and asked where he had found the branch. Then the man did not scruple to make up a long story. 2 years ago I took a ship and started in search of Mount Horai, and going before the wind for some time I reached the far eastern shore. Then a great storm arose, and I was tossed about for many days, losing all count of the points of the compass, and finally we were blown ashore on some unknown land. Here I found the place inhabited by demons who at one time threatened to kill and eat me. However, I managed to make friends with these horrible creatures, and they helped me and my sailors to repair the boat, and I set sail again. Our food gave out, and we suffered much from sickness on the boat. But at last, on the 500th day, I saw far off on the horizon what looked like the peak of a mountain. On nearer approach, this proved to be an island, in the center of which rose a high mountain. I landed, and after wandering about for 2 or 3 days, I saw a shining being coming towards me on the beach, holding in his hands a golden bowl. I went up to him and asked him if I had by good chance found the island of Mount Horai, and he answered, "Yes, this is the mountain." With much difficulty I climbed to the summit. Here stood the golden tree growing with silver roots in the ground. The wonders of that strange land were many, and if I began to tell you about them I could never stop. In spite of my wish to stay there long, on breaking of the branch I returned here. With utmost speed it has taken me 400 days to get back, and as you see, my clothes are still damp from exposure on the long sea voyage. I have not even waited to change my raiment, so anxious was I to bring the branch to the princess so quickly. Just at this moment, the 6 jewelers who had been employed on the making of the branch, but had yet to be paid, arrived at the house and sent a petition to the princess to be paid for their labor. They said that they had worked for over 1,000 days making a branch of gold with its silver twigs and its jeweled fruit that was now presented to her by the knight, but as yet they had received nothing in payment. So the knight's deception was thus found out, and the princess, glad of an escape from one importunate suitor, was only too pleased to send back the branch. She called in the workmen and had them paid liberally, and they went away happy. But on their way home, they were overtaken by the disappointed man, who beat them until they were nearly dead for letting out his secret,
Ah,
and they barely escaped with their lives. The knight then returned home, raging in his heart, and in despair of ever winning the princess, gave up society and retired to a solitary life in the mountains.
maybe he got eaten by a bear. It's terrible.
I mean, one can only hope. He beat up the poor jewelers. They did not
I
deserve
mean,
that.
they did not deserve that. He stiffed them.
The third knight had a friend in China, so he wrote to
I
him to
do.
get this.
I really do.
I, I did for a time. They lived in Hong Kong, but they're back in England now. So the third knight had a friend in China, so he wrote to him to get the skin of the fire rat. The virtue of any part of this animal was that no fire could harm it. He promised his friend any amount of money he liked to ask if only he could get him the desired article. As soon as the news came that the ship on which his friend had sailed home had come into port, he rode 7 days on horseback to meet him. He handed his friend a large sum of money and received the fire rat's skin. When he reached home, he put it carefully in a box and sent it to the princess, while he waited outside for her answer. The bamboo cutter took the box from the knight and, as usual, carried it to her and tried to coax her to see the knight at once. But the princess refused. saying that she must first put the skin to the test by putting it into a fire. If it were the real thing, it would not burn. So she took off the crepe wrapper and opened the box, and threw the skin into the fire. The skin crackled and burnt up in an instant, and the princess knew that this man had not fulfilled his word, and so the third night failed also. For him, I feel sorry for him a little bit, because his apparent friend basically took all his money and just handed over him some fake skin.
But he also should have gone to get it himself. Like,
He also should have gone to get it himself, but
yeah, but
he
still.
does not have good friends. Now the fourth knight was no more enterprising than the rest. Instead of starting out on the quest of the dragon, bearing on its head the five-colored radiating jewel, he called all his servants together and gave them the order to seek for it far and wide in Japan and also in China, and he strictly forbade them to return until they had found it. His numerous retainers and servants started out in different directions, with no intention, however, of obeying what they considered an impossible order. They simply took a holiday, went to pleasant country places together, and grumbled about their master's unreasonableness. The knight, meanwhile, thinking that his retainers could not fail him, repaired to his house and fitted it up beautifully for the reception of the princess. He felt so sure of winning her. 1 year passed away in weary waiting, and still his men did not return with the dragon jewel. The knight became desperate. He could wait no longer, so taking with him only 2 men, he hired a ship and commanded the captain to go in search of the dragon. The captain and the sailors refused to undertake what they said was an absurd search, but the knight compelled them at last to put the boat out to sea. When they had been but a few days out, they encountered a great storm which lasted so long, but by the time its fury had abated, the knight had determined to give up the hunt for the dragon. They were at last blown on shore, for navigation was primitive in those days. Worn out with his travels and anxiety, the fourth suitor gave himself up to rest. He had caught a very bad cold, and he had to go to bed. Now the governor of the place, hearing of his plight, sent messengers with a letter inviting him to his house. While he was there, thinking over all his troubles, his love for the princess turned to anger, and he blamed her for all the hardships he had undergone. He thought that it was quite probable that she wished to kill him, so that she might be rid of him, and in order to carry out her wish, had sent him upon his impossible quest. At this point, all the servants he had sent out to find the jewel came to see him, and were surprised to find praise instead of displeasure waiting them. Their master told them that he was heartily sick of adventure, and said that he never to go anywhere near the princess's house again. Like all the rest, the fifth knight failed in his quest. He could not find the swallow's shell. That's all it says about the fifth knight.
You know, yeah. Oh, God, poor guy.
Like, I've run out of ideas. The fifth guy, yeah, he also failed. Moving on.
He's a footnote.
Yep. By this time, the fame of the princess's beauty had reached the ears of the emperor, and he sent one of the court ladies to see if she was really as lovely as the report said. If so, he would summon her to the palace and make her one of his ladies in waiting. When the court lady arrived, in spite of her father's entreaties, Princess Moonlight refused to see her. The imperial messenger insisted, saying that it was the emperor's order. Then the princess told the old man that if she was forced to go to the palace in obedience to the emperor's order, she would vanish from the earth. When the emperor was told of her persistence in refusing to obey him, and that if pressed to obey she would disappear altogether, he determined to go and see her himself. So he planned to go on a hunting excursion in the neighborhood of the bamboo cutter's house to see her. He sent word to the old man of his intention and received consent to the scheme. The next day the emperor set out with his retinue, which he soon managed to outride. He found the bamboo cutter's house and dismounted. He then entered the house and went straight to where the princess was sitting with her attendant maidens. Never had he seen anyone so wonderfully beautiful, and he could not but look at her, for she was more lovely than any human being as she shone in her own soft radiance. When Princess Moonlight became aware that a stranger was looking at her, she tried to escape from the room, but the emperor caught her and begged her to listen to what he had to say. Her only answer was to hide her face in her sleeves. The emperor fell deeply in love with her and begged her to come to court, where he would give her a position of honor and everything she could ever wish for. He was about to send for one of the imperial palanquins to take her back with him at once, saying that her grace and beauty should adorn a court and not be hidden in a bamboo cutter's cottage. But the princess stopped him. She said that if she was forced to go to the palace, she would turn at once into a shadow. And even as she spoke, she began to lose her form. Her figure faded from his sight while he looked. The emperor then promised to leave her free if only she would resume her former shape, which she did. It was now time for him to return, for his retinue would be wondering what had happened to their royal master when they missed him for so long. So he bade her goodbye and left the house with a sad heart. The princess was for him the most beautiful woman in all the world. All others were dark beside her, and he thought of her night and day. His Majesty now spent much of his time in writing poems, telling her of his love and devotion, and sent them to her. And though she refused to see him again, she answered with many verses of her own composing, which told him gently and kindly that she could never marry anyone of this earth. These little songs always gave him pleasure. At this time, her foster parents noticed that what is happening here?
Just it's like, I love you. I love you. Here's my poetry. That's nice. Thank you so much. No, but I love you. My heart is on my paper.
I wrote these poems for you. I love you.
I'm
Okay,
just
calm down.
and I'm sorry, but at least he was like, okay, I'll leave you alone. Please don't shadow yourself.
At this time, her foster parents noticed that night after night, the princess would sit on her balcony and gaze for hours at the moon, in a spirit of the deepest dejection, ending always in a burst of tears. One night the old man found her thus weeping, as if her heart were broken, and he besought her to tell him the reason for her sorrow. With many tears she told him that he had guessed rightly when he supposed her not to belong of this world, that she had in truth come from the moon, and that her time on earth would soon be over. On the 15th day of that very month of August, her friends from the moon would come and fetch her, and she would have to return. Her parents were both there, but having spent a lifetime on earth, she had forgotten them, and so the moon world to which she belonged. It made her weep, she said, to think of leaving her kind foster parents and the home where she had been happy for so long. When her attendants heard this, they were very sad, and could not eat or drink for sadness at the thought that the princess was so soon to leave them. The emperor, as soon as the news was carried to him, sent messengers to the house to find out if the report were true or not. The old bamboo cutter went out to meet the imperial messengers. The last few days of sorrow had told upon the poor man. He had aged greatly and looked much more than in his 70s. Weeping bitterly, he told them that the report was only too true. But he intended, however, to make prisoners of the envoys from the moon and to do all he could to prevent the princess from being carried away. The men returned and told his Majesty all that had passed. On the 15th day of that month, the emperor sent a guard of 2,000 warriors to watch the house. 1,000 stationed themselves on the roof. Another 1,000 kept watch around all the entrances of the house. All were well-trained archers with bows and arrows. The bamboo cutter and his wife hid the princess in an inner room. The old man gave orders that no one was to sleep that night. All in the house were to keep a strict watch and be ready to protect the princess. With these precautions and the help of the emperor's men, he hoped to withstand the moon messengers. But the princess told all that these measures to keep her would be useless, and that when her people came for her, nothing whatever could prevent them from carrying out their purpose. Even the emperor's men would be powerless. Then she added with tears that she was very, very sorry to leave him and his wife, whom she had learned to love as her parents, that if she could do as she liked, she would stay with them in their old age, and try to make some return for all the love and kindness they had showered upon her during all her earthly life. The night wore on. The yellow harvest moon rose high in the heavens, flooding the world asleep with her golden light. Silence reigned over the pine and the bamboo forest. and on the roof where the 1,000 men-at-arms waited. Then the night grew grey towards the dawn, and Hall hoped that the danger was over, that the princess would not have to leave them. Then suddenly the watchers saw a cloud form around the moon, and while they looked, this cloud began to roll earthwards. Nearer and nearer it came, and everyone saw with a dismay that its course lay towards the house. In a short time the sky was entirely obscured, till at least the cloud lay over the dwelling, only 10 feet off the ground. In the midst of the cloud there stood a flying chariot, and in the chariot a band of luminous beings. One amongst them, who looked like a king and appeared to be the chief, stepped out of the chariot, and poised in air, called to the old man to come out. The time has come, he said, for Princess Moonlight to return to the moon whence she came. She committed a grave fault, and as a punishment was sent to live down here for a time. We know what good care you have taken of the princess, and we have rewarded you for this and have sent you wealth and prosperity. We put the gold in the bamboo for you to find. I have brought up this princess for 20 years, and never once has she done a wrong thing. Therefore the lady you are seeking cannot be this one, said the old man. I pray you look elsewhere. Then the messenger called aloud, saying, Princess Moonlight, come out from this lowly dwelling. Rest not here another moment. At these words the screen of the princess's room slid open of their own accord, revealing the princess shining in her own radiance, bright and wonderful and full of beauty. The messenger led her forth and placed her in the chariot. She looked back and saw with pity the deep sorrow of the old man. She spoke of him many comforting words, and told him that it was not her will to leave him, and that he must always think of her when looking at the moon. The bamboo cutter implored to be allowed to accompany her, but this was not allowed. The princess took off her embroidered outer garment and gave it to him as a keepsake. One of the moon beings in the chariot held a wonderful coat of wings. Another had a phial full of the elixir of life, which is given to the princess to drink. She swallowed a little and was about to give the rest to the old man, but she was prevented from doing this. The robe of wings was about to be put upon her shoulders, but she said, Wait a little. I must not forget my good friend the Emperor. Friend zone the Emperor. Can you do that? I don't know.
It's not friend zone. She wanted to be friends, and he was like wanting more, so he friend zoned
He was like,
himself.
I love you. It's like, I love you too, as a friend.
He friend zoned himself. She said no. He should have moved on, but no, he kept on, kept on. Sorry, dude. It's okay. She's just not that into you.
Wait a little. I must not forget my good friend the Emperor. I must write him once more to say goodbye, while still in this human form. In spite of the patience of the messengers and chariots, she kept them waiting a while. She placed the phial of the elixir of life with the letter, and giving them to the old man, she asked them to deliver it to the emperor. Then the chariot began to roll heavenwards towards the moon, and as they all gazed with tearful eyes at the receding princess, the dawn broke, and in the rosy light of day, the moon chariot and all of it were lost among the fleecy clouds that were now wafting across the sky on the wings of the morning wind. Princess Moonlight's letter was carried to the palace. His Majesty was afraid to touch the elixir of life, and so he sent it with the letter to the top of the most sacred mountain in the land, Mount Fuji, and there the royal emissaries burnt it on the summit at sunrise. So to this day, people say there is smoke to be seen rising from the top of Mount Fuji to the clouds. And that's the tale of the bamboo cutter and his daughter. There was a couple things, but like the thing you mentioned
Yeah, Mount
first,
Horai.
you made a note. Yeah.
We've talked about Mount Horai before. Also, the name of this story, it also can be Kaguya Hime.
I was going to mention that after, so I'm glad you did in case I forgot.
And then we have a bunch of notes now that we have to like go back, so we might forget something.
So yeah, the original Japanese, Kaguya Hime is what's been translated to Princess Moonlight.
I've not heard that before. I've only heard Kaguya Hime, so like that was new for me, that translation.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've only
Oh.
heard Kaguya Hime.
But was this a story that you already knew
Mhm.
before?
Yeah. And this is so I have a movie recommendation for you. There is a Kaguya Hime, and it is a Ghibli studio movie, and it's
Mm-hmm.
gorgeous. It is beautiful. It's computer generated, but it looks like hand-drawn animation, but it
Okay.
bases is computer, but it's absolutely gorgeous. You need to see this. You have to see it. So this story, I saw it there. Plus, it's told in a lot of well, different stories, like different anime, different manga, different even Japanese movies reference this story.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll get like a retelling of this story as well. It's used quite often, and I think I've read it a few places. So it's one of the more common ones I've come across for Japanese stories.
I was just having a quick look about Mount Hordai. 'Cause you said we mentioned it before, but now I'm trying to think, did we or do we think we talked about it? Because I don't think, I mean, Lafcadio Hearn wrote a short story about it that I've just come across now. So I'm trying to think what mountain. We've obviously talked about Mount Fuji, unless we're confusing it with a mountain we talked about for End the Pilgrim, perhaps. There were a lot
Could
of mountains in his story.
let me see if I can get into. Come on, trying to get into my OneNote to check. Huh? Nope, I don't see it anywhere. That's weird.
About it. Maybe it's been mentioned in passing, fleetingly, but
Maybe.
it does ring a bell, but I'm not sure why. The few quick things I looked up online, it's not linking to anything we've talked about, or not even anything we've planned to talk about. So I've no idea.
Gonna bother me. I'll figure it out. Or maybe something I might have seen on TV or the professors mentioned, but it's something you can do in yeah, it's up in is it Hokkaido?
Mount Horai is the Japanese name for a specific mountain in China.
Huh.
So not even in Japan.
This one is in Higashi Horai, Shinhi Hidakacho, Hidaka-gun, Hokkaido. Ah, maybe. Oh. Oh, so we watched this TV show that it's a mountain, it's a venture racer, and he climbs mountains. He's traveled all across Japan. I wonder if that's where I've heard it because he's in Hokkaido right now. He was until it snowed. He couldn't climb anymore. But I
Hmm.
wonder if that's one of the mountains that he's climbing. Maybe that's where I've heard it. Eh, I'll have to ask the professor.
So I like this story because it is weirdly different to any of the other folk tales. And a lot of things online have kind of stated that it's like kind of proto science fiction, like a super early version of a science fiction book, because you basically do have supernatural beings coming from out of space. They live on the moon, and in essence, when they come down to Earth, there is the argument there that it is a form of UFO that comes to take her back home to the moon. So there's an
Oh,
element of a proto sci fi story in there.
I've not heard that before, and that's really cool. I like that. That makes sense. Hmm.
I found it hilarious that we got such an in depth story for all the night. And then the fifth night, it was like, ah, he failed. Thank you, goodbye, next. Like, did the writer run out of time? He was like, I've spent too much time on these descriptions. I'm just going to skip over them. Let's get on to the Emperor and how Kaguya Hime is going to friend zone him.
She said no. He asked, she said no. So I think I still
Friend zoned
maintain
himself.
he friends on himself. Like she said no. It's like, yeah.
But there was one thing that was mentioned in this story that we actually mentioned on our Mount Fuji episode. And it didn't occur to me until I read the end of the story, and that is the elixir of life.
Ah, we have mentioned that.
I remember we did a few of the stories related about Mount Fuji, and one of them was an emperor from China heard that the elixir of life was in Japan. He comes to Japan and climbs Mount Fuji to find it, but dies on his way up. Obviously, they're two separate stories, but clearly they have it was influenced, in essence by this, because perhaps this is the first tale in which it explains the elixir of life is on Mount Fuji. And so the later tale about the Chinese emperor drew on this. I wasn't even expecting a Mount Fuji connection. I forgot Mount Fuji was in this at the end of the book.
Yeah, I don't remember about Fuji being in any of the ones I've read. So
Hmm.
that's
But I love that little connection.
yeah, that tie is really nice. And I like this translation. is interesting. I like the older language. I find it is quite soothing and beautiful in a way.
Yeah,
It's very nice to listen to.
and obviously a lot of added English, like the constant use of knights. I assume it was adapted from samurai.
I assume as well, like your assumption there. I'll go with it.
Or would it have been? It seems logical that a knight would be a samurai, but would a samurai in old Japan be the kind of people who try and find, like, gain the hand of a beautiful person in power? That would normally be the local lords that are in charge, the people who tell the samurai what to do, no? So the daimyo or the shugo, like the provincial leaders, perhaps.
So we would want to probably look at the original translation to see what that word was.
Once again, find the original, see which title they've translated to knight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or even
samurai is a nice idea, but I think samurai would have not had the social standing to be allowed to do such a thing.
not just that, but also if unless they were like unattached samurai, then they really couldn't leave their duties for like 2 years to go off and
True.
find a branch that they didn't find. Yeah, that guy, the whole huge elaborate story, which was all a lie. And he just kept going and embellishing, 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 and we're like, she knows it's not right, dude.
And then he beats them up.
Yeah, it's horrible.
What a horrible person.
But a very, very that not cool, bro. Not cool.
Ah.
But I did. That's why I kept laughing when you kept telling that. I was like, he's just really laying it on thick.
Hmm.
She already knows
Yeah,
you're full of it, and then you
true.
just kept going.
As much as this is like a proto science fiction, it still has a lot of elements of a Japanese folktale. You have the lonely old couple who are both poor, who are both childless and have always wanted children, and they end up with a child. We've seen it with Momotaro, we've seen it with this one, we saw it. I mean, in essence, you could kind of say the tongue-cut sparrow, with the sparrow being the substitute for their child, at least for the old man. Trying to think of the other folk. We've done other folk tales, but they don't. Their trope is slightly different. But at least those ones spring to mind. They're all very similar in
Hmm.
that regard.
But then again, think about a lot of fairy tales we have here. It's always like the stepmom that is in the story. Parents died, or stepmom, or something like that. So very similar
True.
beginnings. For trying to think, Tom Thumb. You mentioned Thumbelina when we were chatting. Thumbelina and Tom Thumb too. Isn't that two older people who've never had children who wanted children found found children somehow that were outside of the
Can't remember about Tom Thumb, but Thumbelina wasn't. The old woman had a plant. She wanted a child, so she watered the plant, and eventually, when the flower opened, Thumbelina was inside. Yeah.
I think so. But
Only difference here is, Thumbelina stayed small and
mm,
she wasn't from the moon. I do wonder what the transgression was that caused Kaguya Hime to be, kind of exiled to Earth, a bit like Superman, just sent to Earth.
hey, well, and also we've had other people who've been sent in exile to Earth. I feel
Hmm.
like we've had other people. Maybe nothing super. I'm trying to remember if I've heard, but I don't think I have. It could have just been something as simple as she didn't use the right cloth to dry her hands. I mean, I don't know. It could have been something very simple, or it could have been something more. But she was only sent for like 20 years as opposed to
Hmm.
a longer
Yeah.
time. So I'm guessing it wasn't. I don't know.
Is it also strange how the story ends? She tried to give the elixir of life to her foster father, but they stop her. So instead of trying to sneakily give it to him by writing a letter, she decides to give it to the Emperor instead. Why would she want the Emperor, who she only saw as a friend, to live forever instead of her parents?
Because he was her friend. She's like, I can't return your romantic affection, but you still have my friendship, and here's a thing for you to help you because I couldn't give it to my parents.
I'll never love you, so drink this potion and live forever and remember that. It's kind of cruel almost.
That's not it's like, no, you want your friends to be okay. Like, here I want you to be a good for your life and to have a good, happy life. So please try to have a good, happy life. I'm saying goodbye. I'm literally going to the moon. You can't come with me, but I want you to have a good life.
Your interpretation as opposed to mine. But yeah, I mean, from reading that, all the things I quickly jotted down, we kind of covered.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of happy with that. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good story. It's
Mm,
um it's sad yet happy. You still kind of wonder what happened to the woodcutter and his wife, and
mm-hmm.
how they got along after she left, and you
Yeah.
hope they were okay. So, I mean, that's but they did have a nice life together with her, so maybe that did help them in their old age. And I'm assuming they still had enough money to be able to live comfortably for the rest of their life.
I assume so. But I think, thinking about it again now, like, comparing it to other folk tales, when they had their new child, they did grow up and they were actively a family. Where in this one, it seems almost like they regarded her as this priceless object and kept her in the house and kind of acted like her servants instead of her parents. That's what it felt like at times. So slightly different to the other tales in how their children were treated. Like the parent-child dynamic was kind of skewed on this one. So I don't know about you, but if you're ready to move on, I know you actually have something new for today.
I do have something new. I
I'm
have a
intrigued, but also scared.
I promise, not scary unless you make it so. But it's a children's game. It's a very old children's game. I am going to read you words. I'm just going to read them. I'm not going to do the little sing-song chant, and see if what you can pull out from this. にらめっこしましょう。笑うと負けよ。あぷぷ。
So this is a game, but they use a song.
Mm-hmm. So, do you know any of those words?
One more time for good luck.
にらめっこしましょう。笑うと負けよ。あぷぷ。
The first one I just keep hearing neko, but I know for a fact you didn't say neko.
No.
But the masho
Uh,
in Japanese, you kind of use that to kind of emphasize something like let's do this. So like tabe masho, let's eat. Nomi
mm,
masho, let's drink. So they're kind of let's do something.
yeah.
But that's kind of all I got. I failed you this time. See, I failed the game.
That's okay. There's some difficult words in here that I know one of them, but it's a conjugation, so you know it. Wow, to laugh. If you saw the kanji, you would have gotten that out.
Yeah.
I've got all in
Mm.
hiragana here, but let's see if I can do the little chant part. にらめっこしましょう。笑うって負けよ。あぷぷ。
So like shout the song.
So the translation
Hmm.
is Nirameko is the staring out or staring down game. So
Okay, so like let's stare.
let's play the staring game.
Mm.
And what now is to laugh. If you laugh, wara uto, to is the preposition, and makeru is to lose, and then apu is just sound. It's just
So
kid sound.
the good old child's game of whoever laughs first loses.
Yes. And basically, you can do a couple things. I've seen this done a couple times. One is one person can hide your face. You can both of you hide your face. Or one person can turn, one person stays there. Both people can turn. It depends. I've seen it a little bit differently. I think I've done like cover your face,
Mm.
and essentially you uncover or you turn around, and then you both make faces, and whoever laughs first is the loser. I always lose this game. I laugh first. I'm like, I never win.
Is there a name for this game?
Niramekko.
Oh, it's just Nieramekko. I don't think it's a game I've ever seen anyone play at my school, but I feel that maybe more elementary school plays it, which is probably why I've never seen it. But maybe I'll see it in April.
Could, and if not, you know it now and you can do it, but you maybe say it in English, like, let's play the staring game. If you laugh, you'll get cut out. Ah, poo, poo. And just keep ah, poo, poo because that's just cute little sound. So,
And
something
that's
like that.
probably the bit they know, so they'll know the game.
Maybe not cut out. Maybe you'll get, but you can't say defeated. So I'm trying to match the lyrics, but something like that. You
If
come up with your own thing.
if you laugh, you loser.
Okay. Then you're going to have kids going, loser, loser.
I mean, they're using English. Isn't that the goal?
It is until they can tell you, haha, loser. Let's play a game, loser.
Yeah, maybe I don't teach that word then. Well, thank you for the game. That was super cute. Now I will have to be on the lookout to see if I ever notice any children playing it.
Now another little thing about this game, because I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. I've mentioned this on my blog before, but then I redesigned my blog and I haven't put those articles back up yet. But a lot of people who know me know that I love this show, Chiko-chan ni shikarareru, which is Chico-chan will scold you. And there's a little segment that they do this game. So basically every week I hear this song and they always have the character doing something silly, like dressing up as like I think they had Kagehime, a Oni mask one time, really funny stuff. So entertaining. And so you can kind of play that game, but everyone always loses because it's kind of funny to watch as the character changes into different really strange things. Oh my god. Yeah, we'll have to try it sometime. If we ever decide to do like a video podcast sometime, we'll actually have to try it.
Yeah.
I'll lose. I'll just lose.
No, you'll be fine.
No, well, I'm gonna lose. I'll laugh
Maybe.
first. I always laugh first. I mean, you know me. I laugh at like
You'll have super easy.
yeah, I'm a easy laughing person.
Well, thank you for the game, Heather.
And thank you for the story, Thomas.
That's
like
okay. I'm glad you liked it.
Mhm.
Obviously, we kind of hinted at what I'm gonna be doing next week. Something around African samurai, basically. So I think it's gonna be super interesting. I'm not gonna say his name or anything like that. We can get into it all nice and fresh next week. I'm sure you'll surprise us next week. Who knows what you'll do? Poem, song, game. Well, I suppose that is everything from me then. Until next week. How's about you?
I as well.
I as well, indeed.
I as well.
Well, until next week then, everyone. Mata ne.
皆さん気をつけてまたね。